Hello, this video is part 2 of factoring cubic expressions using the difference of cubes. Difference meaning we are subtracting. And we will be using the formula for the bottom problem, and before we can use the formula we have to make sure that the 4 steps in the orange box are true. Let's start with step number 1. We have to look at the highest exponent on the variable being the letter. So the highest exponent is a 3, and in order for us to get a true on that one, we have to have a multiple of 3. 3 is a multiple of 3. So number 1 is check. Is there a subtraction symbol? There's a subtraction symbol right here. So check for step 2. Step 3, we have to determine whether the first term is a perfect cube. And the first term in this case would be 64 x cubed. So both the 64 and the x cubed need to be a perfect square. Let's start with the letter. If you have anything with an exponent of 3 or a multiple of 3, it is a perfect cube. So x times x times x would give us x cubed. Again, we are trying to multiply a variable or a number times itself twice, and that number has to give us what we have. Now we have 64. Is there a number that we can multiply times itself twice and get 64? 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. Therefore, 64 is also a perfect cube. Check for step 3. And step 4 is make sure that the last term is also a perfect cube. If we have to multiply a number times itself twice and get a 1. 1 times 1 times 1 gives you 1. Therefore, the last one is also a perfect cube. Now we are able to use the formula. Let's set up the parentheses, the smaller parentheses, the bigger parentheses. We have a subtraction. Therefore, based on the formula, if the problem has a subtraction, the sign on the first parentheses is also a subtraction. Now, the first sign on the second parentheses has to be the opposite of the sign in the first parentheses. If this is a minus, then we are looking for a plus right here, and the sign at the end is always a plus. So we have now completed setting up all the signs for the problem. Now we have to determine what do we have. If we look at the first term was 64x cubed. We will be using letter A for that. So A is going to be, we have to get a combination of the 4 and the x. So A is 4 times x. The reason for that is the first term is 64 times x cubed. So we have to get something from the 64 and something from the x cubed. The 4 comes from the 64, the x comes from the x cubed. And for the b, we'll be using the number 1. Let's look at the formula box. The first term is an a. A is 4x. I will be putting 4x right here. The next term is a b. B is equal to 1. I will be putting a 1. This completes the first parenthesis. Moving on to the second parenthesis, we have an a squared. Now a is 4x. So I will be putting 4x squared. The reason I put it in parentheses is because now we have a number and a letter. So we're going to have to multiply a little bit more. The next term is a times b. A is 4x. B is 1. So if we multiply 4x times 1, we get 4x. And the last term is b squared. B is 1. 1 squared is 1. This one has an additional step because our term is composed of a letter and a number. Let's bring down the first parentheses, the exact same thing we have. Now let's take a look at the first term. If we have 4x squared, that means that we have to square the 4 and the x. So 4 squared is 16. X squared is just x squared. The rest of the problem comes down the exact same thing. Plus 4x plus 1, and that would be it.